I'm Judy Stiles. Thank you for joining us this week on Newsmakers. Well, earlier this year we took a look at some efforts locally to help businesses with cybersecurity, and there's been a series of presentations all year long. We're going to find out today about one of the concluding presentations coming up and what's being done and what people need to know. And joining me today, two people very involved in the process, Ken Surbrugg from the Small Business Technology and Development Center and Jason Rincker with Cybersecurity Awareness. Thank you very much for being here today.
Thank you.
I know we talked in the spring, you were starting this series of programs, and maybe we start off a little bit of background, how the idea came about to say, well, we need to have some programs for businesses, people to understand, what about cybersecurity?
Well, the SBA, who the SBTDC receives part of our funding from, October is Cyber Awareness Month. And, of course, we were trying to get something put together, and in our meetings, we found out that this is just a lot bigger than just a one-month initiative, that we wanted to make this a continuing education programs available to the small business community in Southwest Missouri. So we developed this program, Cyber Awareness 360, and then decided to do the series of programs, not just in October, but throughout the year to help educate the community.
So you have been involved with this ongoing, as you said, continuing education for businesses.
Oh, yes. And to add to what Ken was saying, the SBTDC brought together a lot of area businesses, including, the one I work for, Stronghold Data, some other IT companies, banks, and we all came together and really discussed this program, as Ken said, to make it a very educational event for area businesses and area leaders. So really proud of the group that has come together to put this on, but also the amount of content we have been able to bring to the area.
Well, the title itself, Cyber Awareness 360, and the degrees. Explain that when people see you have a logo on a brochure that you pass out. How does that tie into this? What we're talking about?
One thing about it is when people think about cyber awareness or cybersecurity or information technology, they just think it's one department or one person within their organization. It really is a whole holistic approach to look at your business the entire way. It's the insurance, it's the HR, it's the culture of the business. So it's not just, it's an IT department issue, it's a company-wide issue.
And this makes a more impact, especially with, you say, small businesses is what you're targeting and working with.
Yeah.
We are targeting those small to medium businesses, and again, to add to what Ken says is, cyber awareness there's not a silver bullet. Cybersecurity comes in many, many layers, and you need the support from the top down. So that is why we encourage those business leaders, business owners to attend.
Now, of course, we hear a lot about cybersecurity and individuals. We see on the news breaches and so forth. How's that going to affect me? But are you finding that business owners are perhaps thinking about it more than they used to in the past from these presentations?
I think that this presentation does shed light on the importance of being cyber aware. We still meet with and talk with, as Ken and I discussed before the program, there's a lot of businesses that just think that it's not going to happen to me. I'm too small. Why would they want to come after me? I have nothing that they want. That is a false premise. In fact, what I hear in the world today is if you haven't been breached, it's maybe because you don't know it. And that's how prevalent it is.
Now, the word breach can be broad in many different meanings. We think of, somebody got into my email system. But what are some of the different examples of when somebody say we've had a security breach? What are some things that could be pointed out?
Well, when you look at the definition of breach, that could mean an intentional or unintentional. It's just the release of that information out there. And we see a lot of times where just sending an email to the wrong person could classify as a data breach because that's information that has been sent to someone that was not intended to receive that information. A lot of people think when we talk cybersecurity or cyber awareness or data breach, they have that image of a hooded hacker just sitting there pounding away at a keyboard trying to get in. I read an article just this month where it said 58% of all healthcare breaches are from the inside. And so it kind of puts it in perspective, and that is why I think this Cyber Awareness 360 not only brings to light the need for user training, education, but also just all the different layers that would be involved in a holistic approach.
So you've taken time throughout this last year looking at all these different topics and areas of looking at. I know some of the previous presentations talk about protecting data, even disposing properly of your computers. You know,
exactly.
Those things that you may not think about. You know, I'm getting a new system. What do I do with the old piece?
Right. Yeah. If you replace a computer or hard drive or something like that, why just throw it away? Well, you're just exposing your entire computer system, your files and everything else, to whoever. So it can be easily breached. Yeah.
So the trash isn't necessarily trash; it's someone else's treasure, as they say.
Exactly. Yeah.
One of the presentations we had early on was about that very topic.
Yeah.
If you choose to recycle your old hardware, and some of the responsibilities that go along with that. So just turning over your old equipment to a recycling agency doesn't necessarily eliminate your liability. In fact, again, there was an article where a business filed bankruptcy, and then through that bankruptcy, the hardware, their computer hardware, was sold off. Someone bought that hardware.
Getting rid of everything.
Right. They bought that hardware, and they found data on those old pieces of equipment, and they ended up putting that data for sale on Craigslist. So, again, these are a lot of things that maybe businesses don't even think about when they're considering a cyber awareness program, hence that holistic 360 approach.
Right. So coming up in November, I know you kind of have a theme. I was reading that it's, so what finally happened, and you mentioned there's people who are going to be hacked or have been hacked or will be hacked.
Yes.
So now you're dealing with what do I do when it happens?
Exactly. So it's not going to happen to me, but if it does, what do I do next? So real practical steps. Most of the businesses don't really have a solid incident response plan for something like this. So as we were talking earlier, who talks to the police department? Who communicates this to the customers? What kind of data has been breached? Who do I need to talk to as far as repairing data walls? How in the world do I even buy a Bitcoin, or how do I buy cyber currency? Those types of things. And that's why I think this is really important to kind of end the year, because this is the time of the year when retail businesses and service-based businesses are going to see an increase in traffic. They're going to see an increase in sales. Right. There's an increase, the holiday season's coming up. And so with that being said, what happens if something were to happen to your business?
Is there a season more or less to cyber attacks as well? Do you see more during this busy retail time of year, or the people going online shopping and using all the different companies for links? Is there anything such as that?
That's a great question, and I'm going to speculate that it does have its ups and downs, its peaks and valleys. However, different times of year we see different types of threats. For instance, kind of coming into the beginning of the year, we always see a lot of W-2 fraud, tax time, where they try to get the obtain the W-2 information of maybe your employees, so that way they can file those fake tax claims. I see a lot of opportunities created from national events. Anytime you see a weather event, like the hurricane that happened just in Florida, or the shooting that happened this past weekend in Pittsburgh, we all have a desire to help in those situations, and so these people will take advantage of that to either get you to donate money, or maybe there's a lot of what is called business email compromise, or CEO fraud, and so that's where they try to get somebody within the organization. They're pretending to be that business leader and send that information out. In fact, the FBI just issued a public service announcement with that warning, and they're trying to get the employees to buy gift cards and then push that information out. So, Judy, back to your question. Again, it goes up and down. It just, when we talked last time at the beginning of this series, ransomware was going really rampant. Well, we put up our defenses to kind of be aware of ransomware, and now it's kind of shifting into this business email compromise. So again, it goes up and down.
So you have one type of attack, then you got to turn around and there's something else for people to worry
There's
about.
always something, yeah.
Correct.
Exactly.
Right. Well, let's talk about some of the sessions and what you're going to have coming up in November then, some of the plans you have for who's coming and kind of the focus for people who might want to attend.
This series, it's the final series here in 2018. It's going to be on November the 15th at the North End Zone facility, and we're We're going to have 4 speakers presenting in that time. It starts at 11, ends at 2, so we're going to pack a lot of information in that 3-hour period. Plus, it does come with lunch. So
come for lunch and learn some information.
We're going to get that going. One of the speakers that we have that's coming in is a senior intrusion analyst from Walmart, and his background is with the Department of Defense and a few other government organizations. And he's going to be talking about the models of success, about the 5 pillars that you need to have in place, which I think is going to be very, very exciting. But so he's going to take us down that path.
So he's from big major corporations such as Walmart. He can share information for the small businesses.
Right.
Yeah, he was actually with the Navy as a cryptologist as well. So it's going to be really interesting to hear what he has to say. The next individual that's going to be speaking to us works for O'Reilly Auto Parts, so another Fortune 500 company, serves in their IT department. And his topic that he's going to be presenting on is half of it's going to be what do you need to do to take this information to your leadership, whether that's the C-level, your CEO, the CFO, or what if you're just your president or the owner of the business. What can we do to help communicate it to that top levels of leadership? And then the other part of his presentation, which I think is really, really important for area businesses to understand, is your third-party risk. And that third-party risk is, again, maybe you do business with a vendor that could put you at risk. Or maybe you are the vendor that is putting somebody else at risk. So there's, a heads and tails of that
together
coin.
To cause the problems.
Yes.
That's exactly right, Judy. It does. We're all connected. And I think Mark's presentation is going to be very, very interesting when it comes to that particular piece. The third speaker is Lanny, and he is with BKD, and he was an early presenter at one of our events, and we've asked him to return because he's going to now talk about this incident response, is what do businesses need to know, and I think kind of Ken alluded to who's going to communicate, who's going to do the reporting, who's going to do this. And what he really wants to focus on is not so much from a human element, but more of a procedural and process, and what do we have to have in place for that. And then the last speaker that's going to be involved is Sandra McDowell, and she's going to be talking to us a little bit from a government standpoint. So I would really encourage any state, local, county, city, municipalities, any of those types of government organizations, whether you serve on the city council, whether you serve on any of those committees, any government entities, school districts, come in and listen. She's going to be talking about what those kind of organizations really need to understand from a cyber standpoint.
As people get in, obviously we've seen the stories of governmental agencies being compromised, and they get that information from you.
Exactly.
It's amazing what they're doing, especially at the federal level. And when you really think about, we all often wonder, like you hear about the Office of Personnel Management getting hacked and all the information that got out there. But when you really think about what they got into, that human resources database, and they see all of the applications and resumes of those employees that work for that institution. And you're like, well, what are they going to get off of a resume? Maybe I can get that off of LinkedIn, or maybe that's even public knowledge. But what they were using that information for is they were comparing it to who is actually working somewhere. So if you're like, hey, this person is working now at this particular agency or embassy or something like that, well, that person that works at embassy is not in that database. So they must be an employee of the CIA, or they may be an employee of another.
Digging back in their backgrounds.
And so, so even though these data breaches and the information they get on the surface may be like, oh yeah, they're getting resume data, there's a reason why they're after that data. And it's either for information like that example there, or there's a way to monetize that data.
Right. And of course, the people who are doing the bad guy stuff, they're the ones, they have a motive to make money, to do something with it.
Oh, yeah.
It's usually motivated by finance, yes, but also that information, especially like these nation states, and that's a very big, big thing. There's another article that just came out that said these entities spend 10 times the amount of any organization spends on their IT. And the tools that are available make it very, very easy.
So if you have that little crack to open the door, they're going to walk right in and find things from you, and so forth.
That's right. These businesses have to be right each and every time. The guys that are going after the information, They just have to find one
Yeah. way to get in.
Yeah, they don't care who it is.
Well, Ken, tell me a little bit about, you mentioned, having a plan in place. And when we think about small businesses, sometimes we're pretty small. It's a mom and pop type organization, or, not very many people, so they have to decide, I have to run a business, but yet I have to deal with this problem.
Exactly. So that's one of the great things with this presentation is, what do you include in that? Who do you communicate to? When do you communicate that information to? It's, everybody wants to be transparent. Well, you can be too transparent up front. So you have to kind of figure out what's happening, how deep is the breach, before you can communicate out. So you kind of have to know what you know before you communicate. And so that's one of the things that I'm really excited about with Lanny, is that small mom and pop business, I'm a one-person shop. I mow yards. I paint houses, whatever. They don't need me. They don't want me. They will want anybody and anything. So what do you do? And that's one of the great things about this. And it doesn't have to take 10 hours to put together. And I think that's what this presentation is going to be all about, is how do you condense the information, put it into a file, maybe written down. So
somebody else can follow up on it, right.
Exactly. And that you'll have a procedure to follow.
Right. And you find that a lot of times, if an incident occurs, that first question is, what do I do? Who do I call?
Right.
Do I pick up the phone and call the police department and say, hey, I've got a problem? Or who's the person that you alert? That's one of the first questions people might have.
That, and also, oh no, I don't want anybody to know about this, because that damage of reputation is very, very great. It's a great fear. There's been large retail breaches. Let's talk about like the Target breach or Amazon breach. Some of those. We as consumers, because they're so large, may go back and revisit that business. In fact, the percentage of repeat is quite high. When you start talking about smaller businesses, from medical to financial and all of those, we as consumers start having second opinions on whether or not we're going to go visit that business. So that reputational damage is just another big fear.
It can really affect their bottom line. If
correct.
people suddenly stop saying, well, you lost my information, I'm going to go down the street to the other guy.
Yeah, it's real.
Also that information, once it goes for sale, your competitors can use it. And so that may be another thing, is that they don't want out there, is the competitors to see that. Some other pieces to it is they don't realize what all they need to do, because different reporting requirements can vary from state to state. If you're doing business overseas now, there's some different regulations over there, so it can get quite complicated on what your responsibilities are, over and above their desire to keep the doors open in that day-to-day business that needs to happen. We've seen with the W-2 fraud, where they steal employee data, where now you're contacting all the banks of your employees, and it really starts taking its toll. So yes, from that single business owner all the way up to these Fortune 500 companies, this is a topic that needs to be discussed regularly, in my opinion, because the threat landscape changes, as we discussed earlier in the program.
Now, do you think that there's more out there than we're hearing about? We hear about the big headlines. We turn on the news and they'll say this big company had a breach, or the State Department of such and such had a breach. But is there more behind the scenes we're not hearing about?
Oh yeah, there are. There's a lot. There's breaches happening all the time, and like what Jason alluded to earlier, most small businesses don't want that information exposed. They don't want to go out to the newspapers and say, hey, or to the mass media and say, hey, this is what's happened. We've been breached. They want to keep that as confidential and as low-key as possible to let those that need to know, but they don't want to stand on the mountaintop, so to say, or out here at Missouri Southern, stand on top of the hill. And
we had problems.
Yeah, we've had an issue. So a lot of them will try to work with a security professional company, like S&C Squared, Stronghold Data, Oxen Technology, and they'll try to work with an IT company, or they'll just pay and hope for the best and cross their fingers, or they'll just ignore it completely.
So a lot of times it's kind of a ransom situation. We have your information.
Sometimes.
We're not going to do something with it sometimes, but if you pay us, you'll be okay.
Ransomware is a threat that businesses face, and that's exactly right. And in a ransomware environment that we're in, you have two choices really with it, and that is you have to restore from your backups, or you pay the ransom and hope that you get the key back to unlock your
they're
data.
keeping their word that you're going to be okay.
There was a compromise of a hospital, and they actually paid the ransom, got it back, and then they were reinfected.
Exactly.
Because, again, the threat landscape changes. And so these, again, for lack of a better term, bad guys, if you will, they have realized that, okay, so if we can infect their backups or keep those businesses from going to their backups, then they have to pay this ransom. So they will be very patient. They will try ways to infect their backups first and then infect their, what we refer to as a production copy. And as Ken alluded to, there are many IT professionals in this area that can help you that way, but there's not a silver bullet. It all comes in layers, and it's got to start at the top. We're seeing where these large companies that you mentioned, when they're called in front of Congress to testify, they're calling that leadership in. They're not calling that mid-level employee in. But the mid-level employee is where they're being attacked and getting them to do like the business email compromise that we talked about. And that's what we're seeing a lot of right now from an increase versus the ransomware. So that's just another vector.
So if somebody has a small company and they have employees, they need to be aware of the basic etiquette, safety procedures for accepting emails, dealing with transactions electronically. And
Definitely. And a lot of times small business employees, if they get an email from the boss saying, I need you to open up this contract and review it, you just immediately do that.
He's asked me to do it. I got to go to work.
Oh my gosh, yeah, because speed is everything, and the boss says I got to do it, I'm going to do it. Well, it didn't come from the boss. It came from some bad guy hacker from France or from wherever, what other country, no offense, France. But, and so you look at that and, oops, I just clicked on something I shouldn't have clicked on. Because the boss is away. Right. You know that they're out at a conference or something else. Or I need you to wire me $10,000 or $5,000. And so you process that because you know the boss is away or and so you just immediately do that. And
so the employee needs to know when they have that oops moment, what do you do?
Right. Or to realize, I got an email from my boss that wants me to review this contract. Maybe I should email my boss before I open that email just to see, did you really send me this attachment?
It's kind of raising some red flags.
Right, exactly.
It's
building that awareness.
Again, yes, building the awareness, training your employees. They need to know that, but also that leadership has to have the knowledge and the buy-in that this is something that is serious, that could impact their business. The other factor, though, is social engineering. And so social engineering is basically getting people to do something that they normally wouldn't do. We're all human. We all want to help. And these people that social engineer your employees to get them to do these things, to send the money, social engineering's been around since the early days. I mean, if you have children, you probably get social engineered by them on a daily basis.
Help me out, right?
Exactly.
So, that's just another factor that makes this easier. Cyber awareness isn't just one thing. It's always going to be an ongoing conversation. There's different levels that you can put into practice. One topic we had was cyber liability insurance and how that plays a role. And that's just offloading or moving your risk from your business to the insurance company. But you really need to understand what it's going to cover. Partnering with a company like Stronghold Data or any of the other companies, that's just reducing that risk somewhat. So each one of these things that we're giving at this presentation help minimize that risk, because at the end of the day, you're really just wanting to not be the weakest link, or you don't want your employee to be the weakest link. Unfortunately, maybe you want them to turn their attention to France, as as Ken said. Yeah. So, that's what it's all about.
Right. So your presentation coming up is November 15th.
Yes.
And so how does someone register? How do they get involved in attending this?
They can go to mssutraining.com. And when you launch that website or you go to that webpage, there's a View Events in the upper right-hand corner. They can click on that View Events page. There it is right there, View Events. And they'll bring up a calendar of different workshops that we have, and it's Cyber Awareness 360. So if you scroll down just a little bit further, there it is right there. You can click on that link there, and you can register.
Okay.
So scroll down a little bit below, and it says Register Now.
All right. And so pre-registration, what is your ideal timetable for them to
We'd
do
like
that?
to have people registered before the 12th of November. That way it guarantees them lunch.
Right.
It's $15, and that includes lunch. Anytime after the 12th, of course, you can still register. It's still $15, but we can't guarantee lunch will be provided after the 12th.
Right, for the food count. Now, what if someone
Right.
has been unable to attend the others? Do you still encourage
Oh,
them
of
to come?
course, definitely. This isn't a series where you have to come to the first one to get to the second one. You can jump in at any time. And like I said earlier, this is going to be a busy time of the year as we're approaching Thanksgiving and going into the Christmas season. So if you've got a couple hours to spare, this would be a great time to come and get some really good information from some great experts in this field.
That's something that they could delegate someone to attend if the owner says, I can't get away, but I'll have
Right.
my manager in the shop do it or something.
Right, definitely.
And work together. So feedback from people who've attended the others. I'm sure you've probably heard some comments briefly, what people have said, maybe what they learned from the first couple of presentations or their impact. Do you have any examples?
Personally, the feedback I have received is a lot of just in awe of how much they really need to be aware of.
Yeah.
And I'm saying this again, it's just there's not a magic pill or a silver bullet. There's so much that you have to really put into place. But with any business, there is a lot, especially, your employment regulations that you have, to have employees with the state, or your taxes, or whatever it may be. This just has to fit into it. And you need to recognize the threat and the importance of protecting that business. We're all connected as a community. And we can't afford for businesses to keep going out of business because of something like this. The statistic is that if a business goes down for 10 days or more, they're going to file bankruptcy and close those doors 93% of the time.
It's hard to recover.
So
Yeah.
our communities are all interdependent. And again, this is why we see laws changing to where they're having to vet your vendor's vendor. They're going 2 layers deep because the bad guys, again, are looking for that weakest link. So we want our businesses to understand this, have that information to protect themselves.
Right.
And from the Small Business Technology Development Center, this is just one of the many things you offer, but it's an important part of that overall successful business plan.
Definitely. And as we've kind of alluded through this entire program, it's not just about business plans or how to start a business or what's my cash flow, but this is becoming a very, very, very important aspect of a small business is how do I handle my online presence? How do I keep things secure? How do I keep my, my people trained so they don't click on an unwanted email?
Cause those problems.
Exactly.
So great.
Exactly.
Well, a lot of good information coming up on your last session, and information they can go to your website to find out some more of the
Definitely.
details and gather some information. I'd like
Yeah.
to thank both of you for visiting today and providing some backup information from the past as well as looking to the future.
Judy, thank you.
Judy.
You're welcome. And I'd like to thank you, the viewers, for joining us this week on Newsmakers. I'm Judy Stiles. Hope you can join me again next week at the same time on this station. We'll see you then.